As part of Articipation Week, we have one of Wisconsin's best poets on the podcast today. His name is James Hamilton, and he tours all around not only Wisconsin, but the Midwest, sharing his wonderful poems with audiences in both small towns and large cities. Please welcome James Hamilton to PodPaca. How are you today?
Great, thanks for having me.
So you have published 5 collections of poems. When did you start doing poetry, and was this always your passion?
So writing has been my passion for my life. Since I was a boy, my grandmother is a published author. She wrote a Harlequin romance of all things back in the 80s. So I always wanted to be a writer. And I think my life choices and just, the way society's geared today, work, work, work. But right about a year before we had the COVID-19 lockdown, I started writing poetry, and I don't even know where it came from, to be honest with you. It just people ask me about my process all the time. I say the universe sends stuff down and I write it down. So I started doing that, and then the week before the COVID lockdown, I was doing construction work in like mold, water, and fire stuff, and the company shut down for COVID, and I got unemployment, and I thought, you know what? If there's ever a time that I'm going to try to do this, now's the time. I'm cooped up inside the house. I got money coming in. I might as well give it a shot. So I did. And I put one submission out for that first book for American Junkie, and they took it, which I'm told now is unheard of. But there you have it.
Did you always want to be a poet, even when you were a construction worker before COVID?
No, the crazy thing about it is, I wanted to write. I wanted to write crime fiction. The poetry just happened. I didn't even consider myself a poet after I published the first book. I thought, well, this is great. Let's see what happens. And and that led to a second book and to a third, even before I started calling myself a poet. And the performance aspect of it didn't happen until I just had my year anniversary of performing out live on July 18th. So it's like a year and 2 weeks is all I've been out doing it. So this kind of rise to being a performance artist and a beat poet and all of that stuff happened extremely quickly.
So are you able to do poetry full time, or is this more of a part-time job or hobby for you?
So I could say I have done it full time for the last year and a half or so. I don't have a day job. My day job is being a poet, spreading the word, and writing, performing. That said, I get an awful lot of support from my community here, people in the community, and people that believe in what I'm doing.
So speaking of the community, let's talk about how you will be a part of the Articipation Week for Arts on the Square. On the Friday before, you will be at the Revival boutique, and you will be doing some poetry while people shop. Can you tell me a little more about what that's going to be like?
Sure. So people can come into the store from 3 to 6 at the Revival. It's right on Fulton Street. So when they're on their way down to the street dance, ladies can pop into the boutique and get the shop for the latest fit. While they're there, we can have a 2-minute conversation. Tell me some stuff about yourself, and I'll compose original poetry, personal poetry for shoppers while they shop. There's no charge for it. It's pay what you want. So essentially tips for that. Nobody's obligated to pay anything. And it's kind of just my way of giving back to the community that gives to me, I guess. I've done a couple of them in boutiques around. I did one for the revival in Neenah. I've been in this store last month, and I'm doing one in Ripon for another boutique coming up here. But the thing that I didn't expect to get out of that was, you know, the satisfaction on people's faces, the hugs, the just pure joy when you write something for them, and people come into a store, they shop 10 or 15 minutes, and in that 10 or 15 minutes, they walk away with a completely 100% personalized piece of poetry just for them. I don't keep a copy. It's theirs. They can do it. They can crumple it up and throw it in the trash if they want to when they leave. But, the feedback that I've gotten from it, from doing it a couple of times now, has been pretty humbling.
So, do you like doing this kind of poetry where you are doing it on the fly, or do you like the more long-term writing process with your poetry? What's your favorite?
There's a high stress level involved with writing poetry for people on the spot because it's an instant feedback type of thing. And if it sucks, you can tell on their face that they don't like it. So I guess I like that, interacting with the public on a one-on-one type of basis. There's nothing like that. That said, writing can be very neurotic. I'm alone a lot. I'm in the car a lot. And the actual process of composing can be daunting. Performing can be just like super energizing. I was up in Rhinelander last Saturday for their Push Against Loneliness festival, and I performed a piece for like 300 people up there, and had them interactive, screaming back and forth to me. And I felt like Mick Jagger up there. It was wonderful. It was great.
You mentioned that you had only been performing poetry for about a year and a couple months. Was part of that because of COVID, or did it take some time for you to want to perform on stage?
So my initial, so I can go back to April of last year. Waupaca's got a great arts community and a poetry board that does 2 readings a year. And I went to the reading that they had at Danes Hall in April of 2023. And I met this guy, DG Clearing. He heard me read one piece, and then notice I say read and not perform. I read one piece, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, I think you should come down with me to Milwaukee. There's a longest running poets open mic in the state is at Linneman's River West down on Locust in Milwaukee. I said, okay, sure, why not? So we hooked up, and I'm driving down with him, and he says, what do you want to do with your art? And I said, I kind of just want to stay home and write books and have people buy them. And he says, yeah, that's probably not going to work. He says, nobody knows who you are. And I said, yeah. He said, in order to get people to know who you are, you have to get out and perform. And I said, you mean read? And he goes, no, I mean perform. And I'm not really an extrovert. And at the time, I didn't really want to be up in front of people at all. And he's a very dynamic performer and very polished. And he kind of brought me along for those first, April, May, June, and into July before I actually went out and started doing it with the old college effort. We'd go to readings and he'd record me, and then he'd send me a recording the next day, and he'd say, you need to listen to yourself so you get better. I'd be like, I don't like the sound of my own voice. I don't want to listen to myself. So I'd leave it sit, and he'd message again the next day and say, did you listen to it yet? No, but I started to, and he was right. I started getting better and better. And, now that is pretty much where most of my efforts go, is into the traveling and performing aspect of what I do.
What is the main difference between just reading a poem you made and performing your poem? What does it take to be a good performance poet?
Well, it becomes a performance. There is I know a lot of the working poets in the area now, and we have a lot of discussion about that. It is what we call page poets that generally write their poetry to be on a piece of paper or be read. And then there's what we call stage poets, so page versus stage. The difference for me is in the inflection of voice. We can go from, quiet, it adds another dimension. When you give somebody, like I can hand you a book and say, read one of my poems, you're going to read it. When I read it, I'm going to put accents on certain words. My voice is going to go up and down. It adds a whole nother dimension to the feeling of the piece. And you can control that. When you give somebody a piece of paper, you're kind of at their mercy, and how they interpret it. Which I think both have merits. If a piece is strong enough, it should hold up for both. Is anybody going to read it the same way that I read it? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that they won't get the same inference out of it or the same weight out of it that somebody that listened to me read it would get.
Is there such thing as performing or reading your poem in the correct way? Do you ever try performing a poem and you think, oh, this is completely not what I wanted to do with this poem?
So some of my earlier stuff, I think that when I read it now, I go, I would have done it differently today. But I think that's growth as an artist. A lot of what I write today, I write with a mind to, being equally strong on the page and the stage. The way that I read it, perform it, is the way that I wrote it today. So I write a lot of them to be orated by me. That doesn't mean that somebody that picks it up and reads it. I've had people take my book and read my pieces at poetry readings, their own way. And that's fine. I'm not really averse to it or anything. It just, for me, I think whatever they get out of it, great. However they interpret it, great. There is no wrong way to do it. There's my way, there's your way, there's everybody's way. I think that's what makes art special, is that nobody can do you like you can do you. So the original product is the way that I perform it, the way that I wrote it to be performed by me. But like anybody that writes a great song, 10 years later, somebody covers it and they go, wow, that's a great interpretation of that. The original artist isn't saying, man, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
It's a progression, a moment frozen in time. And, there is no wrong interpretation.
Let's transition and talk a little bit more about the poetry scene in Wisconsin. Has it grown since COVID, and how strong is poetry becoming in Wisconsin?
I could tell you it's been on a steady growth. Even I see it in the last year. Now, COVID shut down everything, musicians, poetry, everything as far as a performance aspect went. But what rose up in the wake of COVID was the podcast and things like that would come on and simulate open mics. I do a show out of a Nuyorican Poets Cafe in New York City. Is probably the most famous poets cafe in the world. And they do a Thursday night show with 20 of us. I'm on there a lot. I'm pretty much, if I'm not booked on a Thursday night, I'm on that show. And that helps. But the growth that I've seen in our neck of the woods, and pretty much statewide, has been phenomenal. The number of open mics is probably sixfold to what it was last year. And I probably get 2 emails a week from people that want to start them, that are looking for hosts and things like that.
Is it more popular in the larger cities, or is there a pretty active scene in smaller communities as well?
So Green Bay has got a great scene. I host one Thursday a month there at the Urban Culture and Arts Center. But there is a ton of poetry events happening in Green Bay all the time. Milwaukee's got a bunch. It's big in Racine. Madison and the college town has always had a great scene in that surrounding area, Spring Green and that. Stevens Point actually has a gal, Frisia, she's a poetry professor, so that you can actually go there and get a degree. They have an open mic that I attend regularly, and we've got an open mic right here in Waupaca, first Wednesdays at the Grand National Lounge. So it's definitely growing, and there's more and more people coming out and doing it. The content of those open mics is changing, I believe. Last year, even I was seeing there were a lot of those page poets coming out, and a lot of those people have kind of converted their work now where they're putting more, vocal emphasis and accents and turning them more into performance pieces. I think it's a good change, and I think it will help growth, because the other thing that I noticed is, like, last year, most of the people who were going to the open mics were poets. And now I'm seeing people that don't write, just general people coming in to see poetry and experience it that aren't artists. And that's huge. If you have an audience out there that's willing to come in and pay $5 or something like that to see you perform, that shows real growth in the scene.
We're lucky enough that James is going to perform one of his poems for us. Before you perform your poem, is there anything you want to tell the audience about this poem that you're performing?
Yeah, so I consider myself a beat poet, like the 50s and 60s beat poets, a modern version of like a Jack Kerouac type of thing. And the piece that I'm going to perform, I actually call Beat, and it is I threw a whole bunch of beatnik slang into this piece as kind of an homage to that generation, and then kind of put a modern spin on it, and then my own little twist to it. But that's about the setup that it needs. It's the old school poets that hitchhiked from town to town and wrote poetry for people or performed it on street corners for tips, and they lived that way. And yeah, I think that's about it.
All right, here's James Hamilton with performing his poem.
Sun spit, radiation bits, rain, solar carnage, parallel promenade rays of bright prison scale bars play monochromatic, magnetronic, orchestral symposium concerto compositions in the key of standard cosmic deviation. Dark to light, days roll to night, back to day. Crazy beat. I sleep when I sleep, hopping train to train rides, Dharma bummed, backpack body armor, skipping technocratic digitalis riddled scrolls, whopping mind numbing thumbing out for rail noise, coal traffic, tar, diesel stench, smoke, crash. Brash, fast landscape band, panoramic horizon flecks of trees, butterflies, and inert gas. Eaten out of stabbed bean cans. I can glide, boss through present time, temporal diaspora, outside line, babble society, clad in mock fodder, rat-fold secondhand finds, rounded peg, square hole variety, beat down. Graffiti is my wall art. I am just bad news. A cheap, creeped gin mill cowboy, juice head, lean, dope fiend, junkie, unwashed public bathroom, food pantry, tenement, shelter, scamp, tramp, vamp, junkman, mingus, monk, bird, jazz club, cockroach, parasite, market raid, pirate take, chicken chase in shapes and drapes, beaten gravel, hopping a bit until an angel comes along to pull me out of this for a minute. Man, I am unraveled, disheveled, bugging out, solo flight, fight, banana peeled, slip and slither, swinging, jungle fed, semi-hairless ape on a vine, noodling life and beat. Thank you.
That was awesome. And
Thank
can you tell me again what the title of that poem was?
It's called Beat.
Beat. That was
Yep.
wonderful. And is Beat a newer poem that you wrote, or?
So yeah, I'm doing the play in Waupaca coming up just before Articipation Week at the Girard Opera House. The premise of the play is it's a talent show in 1959, which is right in the middle of the Beat poet generation. So I'm playing a 1959 Beat poet, and I woke up one morning and I said, I got to write a piece about this. So I literally wrote this like 5 days ago, and
Wow.
I'm going to perform it live for the first time at that play.
So about how long did it take you to create this poem?
4 hours.
Wow.
4 hours in a car. So somebody told me once, if you go to sleep listening to something, you can learn things, and you can, it's that whole creative aspect. So for about 3 nights, when I went to sleep, I'd put YouTube on and I'd run old Jack Kerouac interviews and things like that. And I woke up one morning at about 4:30, and I had this in my head. I had that sunspit radiation bits line in my head, and I could not. I got in a car. I drove down to Rotary Park, and I sat there for. That's why I know it was 4 hours. I sat there from 6 till like 10:05, and it was done. And I haven't changed it since.
Wow. Is that normal and for your writing process for it to take that long?
Yeah.
Because it seems like, I don't know if that's a short amount of time or a long amount of time for a normal poetry creative process, but
people will tell me that, sometimes it happens faster. There's two parts to it. There is, getting down the thoughts and putting down those pertinent lines that are getting your vision across. And then there's a crafting portion where I'm actually going through and I'm reading it. I'm recording it onto my phone and playing it back over the car radio so I can hear the way I'm doing it, and making adjustments on the fly when I do that. The crafting process takes, out of that 4 hours, that was probably 3 of the hours. I literally had the bulk of the text down in less than an hour.
well, it was wonderful. It was really great. And
Thank you.
is there anything else that you would like to talk about with whether it be with your poetry or just something you would like the general public to know?
Well, I think that, the general public's going to get exposed to it during Articipation Week, but Waupaca is does an extremely good job of supporting and promoting and giving artists like me an avenue to share, the work that we're passionate about. And I don't know if that gets said enough. The people that are doing that at the Community Arts Board, Marcy in particular, the radio station, Wayne at the radio station, and Good Morning Waupaca has been nothing short of amazing for me, and getting me out there and promoting and supporting what I do. And they're in for a great week of artists of all kinds: music, poetry, the visual arts, all of that stuff. And Waupaca is as good as anywhere that I've been in the state, and I've been everywhere. you know, and they're as good or better than anybody in the state at supporting artists. This is a great place to live and a great place to create.
I know Waupaca residents appreciate that. Before we go, I do want to make sure that people know where to find where to not only see you perform, but to also get your books. So where can people shop for your poetry books?
So you can get all of the books on Amazon. You can search by title or just search by James Hamilton by author, and you'll find them out there. Or you can get them on my fan site, which is co-fi.com/James Hamilton Poet. And the best way to connect with all of that is on my Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/James Hamilton Author.
Yeah, and you do put on your Facebook page where and when you will be performing, not only in Wisconsin, but in nearby states as well. Do you mostly stick to the Midwest, correct?
Currently, yeah. Yep.
Okay, so if you're anywhere in the Midwest, I bet James will be swinging by there at some point. So make sure to see when he will be performing. Thank you, James, for being on PodPaca today as part of the ARTicipation week. And it was great to have you on. You're the first poet we have ever had on the podcast. So it was very cool to learn more about the world of poetry.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me.
Earlier, we talked to poet James Hamilton, but now we are going to learn more about the arts communities in the entire state of Wisconsin. And we have Katz here today, who is the executive director of Create Wisconsin, which is a nonprofit organization that is looking to help develop and grow arts all throughout the state of Wisconsin. Welcome to PodPaca, and it's great to have you.
Thanks for having me here.
So first off, let's start with what is Create Wisconsin?
So we are the state's community cultural development organization. We are really the only organization doing what we're doing around the state or in every corner of the state. We bring people together and we educate people. That's basically what we do. Really, I talk on the phone, I travel, I go to meetings, and I check my email. But we are a service organization first and foremost. So we serve everything to do with the arts and creativity around the state. That means that we work with nonprofit organizations, for-profit businesses, local government, the economic development world, education, politics, government, pretty much everybody who cares about Wisconsin's future. We exist to serve them in some way. It's a really interesting job because the work ranges from lobbying the legislature for more funding, and that's a huge thing, to helping an individual artist figure out what it means to make your living as an artist. And that's a very subjective thing that everybody has to figure out themselves. We provide resources, we direct people to resources. Again, we kind of stand on our soapbox and proclaim the value of the arts and creativity around the state. So anything to do with the arts and creativity around the state, we are trying to be a catalyst for development. So we have a lot of partnerships with organizations like the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, so that we can help cities figure out how to benefit from the arts. And Waupaca is a really good example of that. So I can talk about that a little bit. We work with the entire arts sector, from the largest organization in Milwaukee to the smallest organization in northern Wisconsin and kind of everywhere in between. We kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the state in terms of not only in terms of the arts, but also in terms of trends in the economy, in education, in politics, because the arts are not separate from everything connected to everything in the world, right? It's not like the arts are over here and then the normal things are over there. The arts are part of everything that there is to do with the arts, with Wisconsin's life. I have been the director for almost 30 years. We have been around for more than 30 years. But we were formed, so I get to travel around the state. I can tell you where the best pie and ice cream is anywhere in the state, because local food, local arts, it all goes together. And I am astounded really every day at the amazing creativity that's out there. I mean, people in Waupaca and everywhere else are really trying very hard to do good stuff for their community. I mean, that's pretty much what it's all about. They want to leave a legacy for their kids. They want to, they want to make sure that there's stuff to do for their neighbors. They want to make their communities better places. And nobody ever has enough money. Nobody ever has enough time. Nobody, but yet there really is amazing stuff going on. So I'm very inspired by my job. I'm inspired by the people that I get to work with. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So it sounds like you're the go-to person for anything arts related in the state for anyone to reach out to get
Right.
help with anything.
Well, pretty much, yeah. I mean, I have been around for a long time, and I pretty much do know a lot about Wisconsin. I mean, I'm not a native of Wisconsin, although I've lived here for 40 years. I really came here not knowing anything about the state in any sort of way. And I have been privileged, really privileged to travel everywhere and to get to know people in the state and see the beautiful landscapes. And we really have everything here. We have what people want. We have amazingly creative people, beautiful communities, gorgeous environment, and a kind of can-do spirit that is very inspiring. So, my job is to kind of help make that happen.
What is arts in Wisconsin doing well? What are they not doing as well? And what are your main focuses right now, and as far as what you're trying to accomplish with Create Wisconsin?
I'm trying to get more money for the arts in the state. That's kind of one of my main. That's more resources. What people are doing, what's happening that's great is that, again, there are fantastic individuals, amazing organizations, very supportive elected officials, and and civic leaders, and they all work together as best they can to really make things happen. So that's the great thing. And as I said, people are doing this work with not enough money, not enough time, not enough anything. And we're in this really interesting moment in time because of the pandemic, because of the politics that we live under, because of the sort of global forces out there where both everything is overwhelming and anything is possible. I think that's the way to say it. The pandemic kind of took everything and went and threw it up in the air, right? And we are now, even though the pandemic has been over, although people still get COVID for a while, people are still kind of trying to figure out what the fallout is of that. And so it may be the case that the ways of doing things before the pandemic are not the ways that that should be done now. For example, people in general, people have been slow to come back to live indoor performances, right? There are X number of people who will never go to a live indoor performance again. They just won't. It's also the case that Wisconsin is kind of an aging state, and so are people that may have gone to the pandemic before to performances or to the arts before the pandemic, sort of may have gotten out of the habit of it. Those are changes that we're dealing with over time. At the same time, our economic structure is changing. We don't make a lot of paper in Wisconsin anymore, right? We don't make cars here anymore. We still have a robust manufacturing sector, but not as strong as it was. Tourism is a huge and growing industry in the state, and people want to live in communities where there is a real, authentic sense of place, like Waupaca. And so there is a trend, and there is research on this, of people. They grow up in a place like Waupaca. They kind of have to get out, to see the world when they're 18 or 20, or after college when they're 22. Yep. And then they go to other places, and then they think, actually, I would really like to go to Waupaca, where my kids can live near their grandparents, and I can afford to buy a house. And, especially if you're a creative person, I could make my art and sell it on the internet. or do something because we have this technology now. And so there is a trend where, and I don't have the specific numbers, but there is a trend where people are leaving for a while and moving back. And that's great in many ways, including the fact that people bring their knowledge and experience with them after having been out in the world, and they infuse it in the community where they live. And so small town Wisconsin is really benefiting from that, because people move back to their hometowns or find a place to live, and then they put down roots in that community. They send their kids to the public schools. They join the volunteer fire department. They become community people. And so that's definitely a thing in Wisconsin that is happening. And that, again, that affects the arts, because a lot of people, especially if you think I'm going to work at home, or you move from a bigger place, I'm going to try to open an art center, or I'm going to get people together to do some kind of theater thing or something. So we're seeing, especially in small town Wisconsin, we're seeing a lot of churn, a lot of activity where old residents, new residents, people who live in the community are working together, to keep making things better. So that's all good.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's really hard, right? You have to find the money. You have to figure out how to break down habits and barriers that people might have. You have to, you just have, it's not like there's pots of money out there to help make things happen. So you have to keep sort of working really hard. And again, I tend to be relentlessly optimistic about this because I see it happening. People are doing that. What's also a really good thing is that, and again, Waupaca is a really good example of this, the local government officials and the economic development people are seeing that the established businesses may be closing, factories may be shutting down. There is a change going on in our communities, and they want to do something. Well, the arts bring people together. The arts are small businesses. The arts are all of the things that make a community, the arts define place. And so local government and the sort of private sector is getting involved in sort of exploring this idea of the arts from the ground up. And in Waupaca, I think it was 2017, the city of Waupaca contracted with what we were called Arts Wisconsin then, with our organization to help do a cultural plan. And this happened because organizations like Waupaca Arts, the Waupaca Community Arts Board, and other organizations had really worked hard to do the great programming they were doing, but also get the attention of the city officials and say, hey, this is a really cool industry we've got here. We should be more planful about it. We should do more to make sure that this grows. So my organization worked on a cultural plan for Waupaca, which, since it was introduced, and I think maybe 2018, people just keep doing things that are in the plan. I mean, usually, sometimes you write a plan and nobody does anything with it. But in Waupaca, the city is very involved in this creative development. Waupaca Community Arts Board, the Waupaca Arts Hub, Danes Hall. I mean, all of these different entities are really involved in helping the arts grow. You've got this podcast. That's pretty cool. And you and I met when we did, a meeting with the legislator to sort of talk about the cool things happening in Waupaca. So Waupaca really is a model. I often talk about Waupaca as a model of an involved community that it's kind of like being a little Energizer bunny. You just have to keep figuring out, what can we do next? How can we get people involved? Where's the money going to come from? And the city and the nonprofits and the individuals and the private sector have all been working together pretty well. Now, there's certainly personalities and politics involved in everything, but in general, Waupaca is a really good model of how that community, how a community can work together to keep growing opportunities.
In a small town.
In a small town, right, where, it's the same as in a big town, except the scale is much different and everybody kind of comes into contact with each other much more.
Yeah.
So, but really, that is what's happening in in a lot of our small towns, and it's great. It's really great.
Do you think developing the arts in smaller towns is more crucial than in the big cities in order to strengthen the arts in the entire state?
Oh, yes, it is. It is, it is definitely all of a piece, right? I mean, I have the benefit of seeing what's happening in every place out there. And so I can see that what happens in Waupaca, I often like, I tell people, go talk to the people in Waupaca because they've done some really cool things. Now, I just want to say, have they figured out all the answers? No, none of us have figured out all the answers, but Waupaca they keep trying to answer the questions. But Waupaca and any other small town is all there. Everything is connected. What happens in Milwaukee is important to Waupaca, and what happens in Waupaca is important to Milwaukee. And my job is to keep helping people understand that. But it's really important that every community is looking for a way to brand themselves as different than other communities so that they can get people to visit, they can get people to live there. And so it's incumbent upon every community to kind of work together to figure that out. And in a small town, you could live in anywhere. You could have your choice of where to live. And if you think that a place like Waupaca has the things to offer that you want, then you'll choose that. And Waupaca has to make sure that that, right? And again, Waupaca and a lot of other places are using the arts to kind of brand what they have to offer. We're a place where the arts happen on the local level. We try to work together. We have very creative people here. We have the lakes. So every community is really trying to show themselves off, and you have to figure out what your assets are. So in Waupaca, it's the lakes and the people, and pretty much everywhere it's the environment and the people.
Yeah.
And you make the most of that, right? You promote it as much as possible. And that's what I see people doing all the time.
So you mentioned earlier that you are working on getting funding from the state for the arts. That was the first thing you mentioned when you talked about what you're trying to accomplish. So can you give us a brief summary of what has happened in the past in Wisconsin compared to other states when it comes to the arts, and how it's ideally supposed to work, or how it's more normal and
I don't use
Wisconsin is above average or below average?
don't use the word normal. There is no normal anymore. It's all
Okay.
just chaos. Wisconsin, so every state has a state arts agency that is mandated. It's mandated by the state. So there's the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the federal arts agency, and then every one of the 50 states and the territories has an arts agency. So the Wisconsin Arts Board is our agency. And those agencies get money from the state, sometimes from other sources, but primarily from the states. So there's also lots of other ways that the arts are funded: the university system, the technical colleges, K-12 education, tourism, economic development. But the Arts Board is kind of the most visible arts agency. So before 2011, Wisconsin was kind of the middle of the pack. We had about per capita, our funding was 30th or 40th or something like that, but we had a few $1 million. That budget was cut in 2011. And so Wisconsin started out with, as of 2011, with less than $1 million in per capita funding for the arts through the Arts Board. That has grown a little bit. There's about $1.1 million, and that money is matched by the National Endowment for the Arts. And those monies are granted out to nonprofit organizations, some individual artists, all for the purpose of encouraging people, enabling people to participate in the arts, right? So if we let the market dictate whether people could participate in the arts, then really people who were able to afford the price of a ticket would be able to participate, but we want to make sure that there are events that are free to participate, not free to put on, because of course they all cost money, but free to participate. We want to make sure that there's arts education in school so all kids can get that in their education. We want to make sure there's music festivals and art fairs and things like that. Those are things that people want to enjoy, and they cost money to put on. So that's, the state covers that kind of event or program. Right now, Wisconsin provides, with the money that Wisconsin provides for the Arts Board, it's about 18 cents per capita, and we're 49th out of 50 states in per capita funding of the arts. So that is really bad.
Yeah.
Minnesota provides over $9 per capita, and Illinois provides over $7 per capita. Even Iowa is 48 cents per capita. So we have about $1 million for the arts, and again, it's amazing. So that money goes out in very small little pieces to arts organizations and other arts projects around the state. So we are trying. In fact, I just had a meeting yesterday and a meeting today with legislators and constituents in small towns to help people understand that we really need to invest more in our creative resources, because again, that's what makes a community unique. That's what brings people to a community. That's why people want to live in a community. All of that is part of the economic, workforce, and civic development of a community. So I'm really optimistic, because no matter what side of the aisle you're on, every legislator understands that the world is changing and we got to do something to get people to pay attention, especially in our small towns. And so we've gotten very enthusiastic responses from legislators, and constituents tell their stories. And so we're really going to be making a big push for more funding this year when the budget season comes along, and we'll come to people in Waupaca and say, please help us make that happen.
So how do residents and local artists, no matter if it's in Wisconsin or in another state, how do they help push the message of, we would like to see more money go to the arts?
Well, first of all, go to our website, which is Create Wisconsin, all written out, createwisconsin.org. And we have information about our legislative agenda and things you can do. First of all, vote. We've got a primary on Tuesday, and we have the general election on November 5th. And not only are those elections important for the presidential races and the congressional races, but we've got our legislative races as well. And so voting is number one. You've got to vote. It's every citizen's right and duty and privilege to vote. Then what we're working on is putting the constituents together with the legislators, with the decision makers, right? So we are arranging meetings. We're talking to people about connecting with their elected officials, either one-on-one or in group meetings. So we're working on that. People can send emails, people can send handwritten letters. There's a lot of stuff on our website that goes into those details about what you can do. And our annual our annual advocacy day, we have an advocacy day every year that happens in the spring. Because it's budget season, it's especially important. So that's going to be on April 1st, 2025 at the Overture Center in Madison. So we encourage people to come to that. So there's lots of things that people can do to make things happen. So we are just encouraging people to take big steps or small steps.
The first thing that came to my mind when I heard about Wisconsin having 49th out of 50 of funding per capita is, well, where else would this money be going to? And does the money exist? But is there any statistics as far as how much money is going into the state because of the arts?
So we have some data along those lines. The Wisconsin Arts Board worked with a national organization, Americans for the Arts, to look at the economic impact of nonprofit organizations. So the Waupaca Community Arts Board, the Waupaca Fine Arts Festival, that kind of organization. And they measured the economic impact. And this information came out in the spring, I think. And it showed that the economic impact of the nonprofit arts sector is $933 million. So that's money that's people spend, that's event-related spending. They have hire babysitters, they get gas at the gas station, they eat out, they go shopping, they stay at hotels, that kind of thing. So that's pretty good. Then if we look at the whole arts sector, so nonprofit organizations, independent contractors, for-profit galleries, which is and architecture, media, anything creative related, that's a much bigger piece of the pie. And that's that information has been researched by the US Department of Commerce. So that's, that's pretty good information. And that's 11.9 billion with a B, $billion in terms of economic impact. So that's even better because we're looking at the whole arts sector, the whole creative sector. That's billions of dollars. And it also encompasses at least 89,000 jobs. So those are full-time jobs where people pay their mortgage and pay their taxes. So those numbers, when you put those numbers together with the stories, those are impressive. And when you think about the fact that those are big numbers and we're still only putting $1 million into investing in our creative resources, and people are still doing amazing things. Imagine what we could do with even a little bit more money. So we talk about investment. We're not just kind of throwing money at the arts and, watching it float away. When we invest in the arts, we're investing in people, organizations, businesses, and communities. And so Wisconsin will always invest in its economic growth, right? Used to be factories where they made cars or made paper. Now it really should be small business, entrepreneurial ventures, nonprofit organizations, small galleries, whatever. That's what we're really trying to encourage, that kind of investment. We should be doing more with that investment, especially since our neighboring states and everybody else are cleaning our clocks by doing more with it. So that argument, we just keep saying that over and over and over again, and people are hearing it.
Is there any proof of when you say the neighboring states are having more funding, do they have a larger economic impact because of the arts due to the rise of funding from the state or not?
There is a bigger economic impact, and there's tangible economic impact in terms of money, but there's also perception. So Minnesota, to use that example, invests more money in education and the arts. They have a higher per capita income. They have fewer people in prison. They have a lot of the indicators that people want, especially young people. People want to live in places where, they can see that there's opportunity. If you live, it doesn't really matter, but if you live on this side of Wisconsin, which is only 15 minutes away from St. Paul, all you have to do is move across the river, the St. Croix River, and you will be able to access a lot more resources and funding and opportunities. I have people in Hudson, Wisconsin, or in Superior, which are border communities, saying that they have a hard time hiring people because there's more money in Minnesota, there are higher salaries, right? So people are going to work in organizations or businesses in Minnesota because you can make more money. There's more money for business development in Minnesota. So businesses would go and start, instead of starting in Superior, they would go and start in Duluth. So it's that kind of thing that adds up. In the meantime, we have resources here that everybody wants. People want to vacation in the North Woods. They want to go to the Dells. They want to go to the chain of lakes, whatever. And we really should be investing in those resources and not investing in our people. So that's
So,
the argument we're making.
but it does sound like too, be a little bit devil's advocate here, that Minnesota does have more money, so they can put more into their arts and community. So won't the state have to make more money in other ways in order to provide more money to
Well, okay, first,
tourism and arts and all that?
Minnesota doesn't necessarily, Minnesota has designated more money for the arts. They actually have a sales tax that goes, a portion of which goes towards the arts. But it's political will, really, right? As I said, Wisconsin or any state has to invest in its economic growth. So we can either invest in, we have to choose where we invest. We used to invest in car factories and paper mills, but that not so much anymore. So we should be investing in our resources, in our people, in our, our human resources, and our creativity. We really should be investing in our creativity. So let's take a small portion of the money that we invest in economic development and put it towards the arts. So I don't hold with the argument that there's no money. First of all, Wisconsin last time and this time will have a budget surplus. And the question is, what do we do with it, right? Everybody wants, none of us want to pay higher taxes. Believe me, I don't want to pay higher taxes either. But we can generate more taxes if we invest in the things that will grow. And again, if you have a theater in a downtown, if you have an arts festival, if you have things going on, people will come to that town and spend money. And so again, $11.9 billion for all the arts, 933 million for the nonprofit sector. Those are numbers. Those are numbers of economic growth. And we need more investment so that we can grow those numbers.
And then this also sounds like would be similar to getting more events where out of state tourists would then come into the state. In Green Bay, the NFL draft is coming next year, which will be a huge event. There's the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee this year. Is part of this initiative trying to get more of these events to come to Wisconsin?
Oh, sure. I mean, Top Chef came and filmed in Wisconsin last year, and that was a huge thing, at least in Madison, Milwaukee, and some small towns. I know the Department of Tourism definitely is working on getting more of those kinds of events. Anytime there's a Packer game, that's a huge economic impact in many, many ways. People stop at the gas station in Waupaca, right? And they, so we want to have more of those. We also want to make sure that we invest in our local resources, right? So whatever an art fair or some local performance may not be as, I don't mean to be disparaging when I say this, but sort of big and sexy as the NFL draft, but it is incredibly important to the local community that we have that kind of local event. People want stuff to do in their communities. They want to be able to give their kids opportunities in their communities. And so that kind of investment takes a lot of money to put on the NFL draft, which, will totally be worth it. But it doesn't take that. It takes much less money to put on a local event, and it provides a good bang for the buck because people say, "Oh, Waupaca is a cool place to live because there's this, this, and this. Let's visit, and maybe we'll live here." There's research out there that shows that at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people who had vacation homes on the chain of lakes or in the Northwoods or wherever, or in Door County, they stayed in, if they had furnace and internet, they could stay in their cottages and they could ride out the pandemic. They didn't have to go back to Chicago or whatever. They could stay in their beautiful cabin and, and have that instead of going back to the city. And so how many of those, so that's a real thing that happened in Wisconsin. How many of those people have stayed or might consider coming back, So, I mean, again, we had, and I actually know, I have actually talked to a number of people lately who are climate refugees. So we don't have wildfires. We have some tornadoes. We don't have hurricanes. We don't have, we don't have flooding. If you live on the coast and, you have wildfires every year, you might think, oh, where can I live that, first of all, I can't afford to buy a house in California, but I could afford to buy a house in Wisconsin. So there are people that are taking that into consideration as well.
You mentioned that those kinds of events were larger and more attractive to get. I do get the impression, from my point of view, from how long I've been here, that having the RNC and the draft is really not normal for the state, and it should help also the local, or not local, the small towns as well, since you're going to have to travel through them to get to these events. So should there be more of these events in the state, or is that not the correct way to approach?
No, I mean, I think the people that are working in development on the local and state levels are always looking for those opportunities. We should seize those opportunities whenever we can. Absolutely. But that's, the RNC is a once in a lifetime thing. The NFL draft is probably a once in a lifetime thing. Those are great. In the meantime, we should also be investing in our local communities every year so that people can have things to do, whenever. And so it's
Sounds
not
like
either,
more long-term
yeah,
solution.
it's not either or, right? It's not one at the expense of the other. It's, let's see if we can get, the Top Chef thing that happened last year. The Department of Tourism worked on that like crazy for a long time. I mean, they put every effort they could into getting that to be able to show off Wisconsin's food scene, which is great. And they also do a million other things to promote vacationing in Wisconsin in any vacation area. So they do both. So we need to do both. We need to make sure that we have cool things going on, big things, so that people can see, oh, look, there's Wisconsin on the TV. And again, stuff at the library, stuff in the park, stuff in the schools, so that people can have that enjoyment in their everyday life.
And a big part of this whole equation is media. I'm a little bit biased to wanting to learn more about the media since I do this podcast, but that is a newer and large part of the arts. We're seeing other communities where the arts, maybe you didn't think of the media or arts in those communities, but now there's things popping up everywhere, like in Austin, Texas, in Indianapolis. I know those are large city examples, but that does impact the state as a whole. How can we maybe get some more media attention in Wisconsin and more productions to happen in Wisconsin?
Well, there's also a big effort to get to establish film incentives in a film office, right? So that's another effort that's underway that we've been working on a little bit. We had a film office, we had film incentives, and for a variety of reasons, those went away. But, again, that's another, I mean, the film industry in states that have those kinds of incentives, that's a huge, it's a huge opportunity. Again, is it going to solve everybody's problems? No. But if you have a film made in your community, then that's jobs, that's money coming in, that's all those things.
So is that part of the mission of Create Wisconsin, since
part
of the arts? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, we get involved in whatever effort we can, as much as we can, to help people on from the local level on up generate money and attention.
Is there anything else that you would like the Wisconsinites to know, or anyone in any small community, about the arts?
In some ways, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but don't think of it as the arts, right? Think of it as ways for people to get together, ways for people to express themselves. Sometimes when you say the arts, people say, oh, well, I'm not involved in the arts. But then That person could be a quilter or a woodworker or any kind of creative endeavor. Everybody has something creative, right? There isn't anyone who doesn't do something creative, even though most people don't think of themselves as artists. So we want to really encourage people. That's why we talk about creativity. So not so much the arts, because really it's all about creativity and all of its resources. And so we want to really encourage people to, figure out how they can be creative, whatever that means. And we want to encourage communities to help people be creative at home. So I'm pretty optimistic, as I said, about the fact that there is so much going on and there's so many people really working hard. And I'm optimistic that we will keep getting attention for all the things that are going on in Wisconsin, and and just keep increasing the amount of opportunity that's available, which again will help attract people to a place like Waupaca, whether to visit or to live, and just keep kind of making things stronger. So that's my job.
What can we look forward to with Wisconsin creativity within the next couple of years?
Again, we're working on getting more resources because that is what we need. People, again, Create Wisconsin is createwisconsin.org is our website. We're on social media. I just encourage people to get out and be creative and to work with their neighbors to help other people be creative, right? I mean, humans are social creatures. We can't help it. And so what I see is that people are working with their neighbors to make creativity happen in some way.
Well, thank you so much for being
Well,
on today and teaching all of us about what's going on with arts in the state of Wisconsin. And it's awesome to have you be a part of the ARTicipation Week and Arts in the Square in this way as well.
Well, I'm glad to be asked, and I'm impressed that Waupaca has done this kind of participatory event, and have a great time.